And now there are two. Former governor of South Carolina and Donald Trump's former ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, has thrown her hat into the presidential ring, announcing she will run against her former boss and former president, despite earlier saying she would not run if he was running. In her campaign announcement, she touched upon her upbringing as a daughter of Indian immigrants, saying that the US needs to strengthen its border, needs a new generation of leaders, and vowed to be strong on China and Iran. But she has her work cut out, as the bookmakers believe that the Republican Party will be split into supporters of Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Still, if there is such a strong split, could this benefit a third candidate such as Haley? Why did Haley U-turn in her decision not to stand if Trump was standing? Who will be the Republican nominee for the 2024 election?
So let's get to it. Who will come on top? Who will be the Republican nominee for the 2024 election race? As always, we begin with our quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick up the conversation from there. So, Corinne Clark, please take the lead.
Well, at this point in the race, it's still early. To say that I could predict the nominee would be kind of ignorant of how fast politics move and how quickly this game changes.
Fair enough.
I think
yeah. I fear that we have some technical issues hearing you well, so hopefully it will be fixed shortly. Yigal, Marcus, your take?
Yeah, the next president of the United States will be Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley will be his running mate.
Oh, okay. Short and precise. Mark Schulman.
I think there's a great chance that Trump will be the nominee. The reality is, with winner take it all in the Republican circles, he has 1/3 of the party 100% behind him, and no one's going to leave him. So there's a really good chance that he will get it again. DeSantis has a good possibility. Nikki Haley is much less likely. She would be the best candidate of all of them, but that will not necessarily mean she'll be elected by the Republicans to run.
Okay, and before we elaborate on that, we also asked the same question, I-24 News viewers and followers online, and this is what they had to say in a Twitter poll, who they think will be the Republican nominee for the 2024 elections. 38% supporting, or thinking rather, it will be Trump. 28% believe it will be Haley. 21 voting for Ron DeSantis, and another candidate, 13%, and we are expected to see more candidates joining the race naturally. Okay, let's feel free to interact from this point onward. So let's begin with the fresh blood in the race. Nikki Haley, what is she bringing to the table? What is her game plan here, if you will? Yigal.
Well, she brings the perfect mix of executive experience and foreign policy. And this is a person who has an outstanding career running a great state. And when she became the ambassador to the United States, the United Nations, she did an outstanding job as well. So I think she brings all the right pieces. The question is a matter of building that infrastructure, the funding certainly, and really getting out there and getting her message out there. But I do think that she has all the right experience and she has the right personality to really have America fall in love with her. And she's an underdog, but she's never lost a race. And I don't think she's planning on losing it again.
Corinne, what do you think? Okay, yes. Mark, we're fixing some technical issues. Yeah.
So first and foremost, she has courage. The fact that she's willing to be the first one to come in and go against Donald Trump, that shows a lot of courage. We'll see how he reacts. He's been attacking DeSantis constantly at this point, even though DeSantis has not said he's going to run. So I give her a lot of credit for having the courage. Like I said before, she'd make the perfect candidate for the Republicans. However,
you're saying it as a Democrat, Mark Schulman. Let's be.
I am saying that as a Democrat, absolutely. Although officially I'm neutral, but yes, I lean Democratic without a doubt.
Right.
I lean Democratic. That's no question about that.
Your journalistic analysis is obviously neutral,
right.
But yeah.
So absolutely, she would be the best candidate to take on the Democrats, both because she's moderate, both because she's a woman of color. She would definitely be a very big challenge to the Democrats if she was to run, and she has experience, which some other Republicans don't really have on the same level that she has. However, it's not clear to me the Republican base is ready to move on from Trumpism. So whether it's Trump himself or DeSantis, which represents Trump light to some extent, the culture wars and all these other things that Nikki Haley doesn't really bring, which is one of her pluses, it's not at all clear she could win in the primaries, and that's what I fear. I mean, as a Democrat, that's great. You know, who wants her as an opponent? But for America, it would be really great to have someone like Nikki Haley and have an election around issues and serious matters, as opposed to culture wars and other related things.
So, Corinne Clark, do you think it's fair to say that the Republican race will be more or less of a referendum on Trump?
I do think it will be, and not in the way that a lot of establishment elites are hoping. I think that Trump has a lot more support than people in Washington, D.C. and political consultants would like to believe. And let's just be honest, even Nikki Haley's popularity could be credited to Trump. Her experience in the spotlight in the last few years was as Trump's ambassador. That's why most people outside of South Carolina even know who Nikki Haley is. So I think Republicans owe a lot to Trump's record and the excitement that Trump has built around our party. And to be completely honest, there has been no one as successful with igniting the Republican base as President Trump has been. And I don't think there will be. So I think the momentum is on his side, and he will light it up again like he did in 2016, where he took out a much more crowded field than he is dealing with now.
But in this respect, Corinne, how did midterm results define, or are defining rather, the Republican Party moving forward when it comes to mega extremists, to old school Republicans who can perhaps walk across the aisle to an extent?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because there is so much discussion about how the 2022 elections proved that Trump wasn't popular, but we actually saw the highest popular vote for Republicans in history. That shows a lot of energy. In races that we lost, more people were showing out to vote than ever before. So I think there's a lot of chatter, and they want to take this victory away from Trump. But if you really boil it down to the numbers, that it would be ridiculous.
Yigal, please,
the
Mark.
reality is the way the Republican nominating cycle works, it certainly works in Trump's favor, because it's winner take all, and because if you get a third of the vote and the others get 10% and 5% and 12%, you end up with all the delegates. So the reality is Trump, with a solid base, let's say of 1/3 of the Republican voters, with that 1/3, he can actually make his way to victory in the Republican Party that way, and it'll be very, very hard to break that. So that's why I say the greatest odds are that Trump will be the nominee. Of course, there's a whole year and a half, and there are legal issues, and a lot of things could happen in between. But everything else being equal, then I think he will most likely be the nominee, just because of the way the things are set up, and because his base is so strong.
So Yigal, to that point exactly, at what point of the race will the quote-unquote counter-Trump camp within the party team up to take him out? At what time they will narrow the effort into one candidate?
That's a great question. I think that one of the things they learned from 2016 is that allowing too many candidates to last too long really does, to Mark's point, split up the vote. And, 2/3 of the party will choose not to vote for Trump. So the earlier the other candidates get out of the race, the better the chance of another candidate like a DeSantis or a Haley rising to the top. So I do think that they're going to get out earlier. And one of the advantages of getting into this race early, like what Nikki Haley is doing, and I suspect others pretty soon, is they're gonna know if they're able to win. They're gonna build their infrastructure. They're gonna build their campaign. They're gonna try to fundraise. And very early on, if they don't see success, they know for the better of the party, get out and let the final candidate or two run against Trump, and allow the voters to choose from a much tighter and select group of candidates. I think they learned that lesson in 2016. And I suspect we're going to be down to 2 or 3 candidates after the first 2 or 3 primaries.
The party might have, but politicians tend to be narcissists, and they somehow keep on believing that they can pull it off. What?
Except for Trump. Not the Republicans, except for Trump.
Well, if it was a Shakespearean play, vanity definitely would have been embodied in a human nature to an extent. Corinne, let's circle back to Haley herself. She's talking about this new generation of leadership, new blood, but DeSantis, Pompeo, Pence, she very much included, they all revolve around Trump in that way or another. Will we see candidates from outside the circle, so to speak?
Yeah, out of all of those candidates that you just listed, Pompeo, Haley, Pence, Trump has the least amount of time in politics of all of them. If there was an outsider on that list, it is President Trump. Nikki Haley has been in politics way longer. Ron DeSantis has been in politics way longer. We know Pence has, and Pompeo, both as executives and as members of Congress. The outsider candidates here is still Trump.
So a former president is still able to maintain this anti-establishment sentiment, the brand of the anti-establishment candidate?
Oh, if the comparison is the field that you mentioned, he is absolutely the outsider candidate there. The years of experience don't lie there. They've been working in politics their entire careers. He hasn't. He worked in business.
So a failure in business makes you, and not a greatly successful presidential, it makes you the best candidate. I mean, these other people do have better reasons for people to vote for them, quite honestly, across the board.
Well, experience seems to be a burden, not a virtue. Yigal, how conservative is the GOP nowadays? Are we to see a more moderate Republicanism now, or the other way around?
I don't think so. I think we are, given how left and how woke the left enclaves have become in the country. I believe we're going to try to offset that with a strong conservative candidate. I think America's ready for that. We're seeing that with the success that Ron DeSantis had in Florida. By the way, I think it's called the free state of Florida where woke goes to die. I think that's the actual name of it. But nevertheless, I think we're seeing a real movement now to put up somebody who's not an angry Republican, but somebody who's an inspiring Republican. Young, new generation of leaders like a DeSantis, like a Nikki Haley, who, yes, have the experience, but have not been sucked into Washington, D.C. and have all the baggage that the former president has. Of course, if he's a nominee, we'll get behind him. But I'm hoping that that will expand and let America see other options and then make a very well-informed decision.
I just question the word conservative because that's an interesting question. What does it mean to be a conservative? What values are we talking about? What are we talking in terms of foreign affairs, about Ukraine? What are we talking about free trade? All these sort of matters that were traditionally conservative Republican values are now something else today. The only area that Republicans, that when you say conservative, seems to be on social issues.
Okay, and on that point exactly, we will wrap up the first part of our conversation, but right after the break, we take it from this point exactly. Foreign policy, anyone? Don't go anywhere. We're back with the summit in a few minutes. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Yigal Marcus and Corinne Clark and Mark Schulman. What a panel we have tonight, and we're staying on topic, of course, but first, let's take a listen to some of Haley's announcement earlier in the day, pointing the fingers inwards to an extent. So let's take a listen.
Republicans have lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections. That has to change. Joe Biden's record is abysmal, but that shouldn't come as a surprise. The Washington establishment has failed us over and over and over again.
So let's get to it. Why do Republicans lose the popular vote? Another quick fire round, and we'll pick it up from there. Yigal Marcus, take the lead, please.
Well, that's a great question. Leftism and wokeism are very, very infectious. And when you go to the big cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, it's an echo chamber. So you get the popular vote because you're in these huge enclaves. But when you look at the map, the American map, and you paint what's blue and what's red, it's vast, vast, vast majority red. Because when you get out of those enclaves and you actually look at things objectively, you vote Republican. Very, very hard to break into those enclaves.
Corinne?
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely true. The big cities are a haven for liberal voters and turn out a vast majority of the popular vote. I do think that is starting to change as we see a lot of Republicans are running to these red states. They're turning out in bigger numbers than ever, as I said, because they know their votes are going to count there. And it means something, where I think for decades previously, Republicans in California didn't necessarily feel like they had to cast a vote for president because it didn't matter. That's changing, and I hope that the popular vote changes along with it.
Mark, your take?
Well, the Republican policies are not all that popular amongst the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans live in the cities. Certainly amongst the urban populations, their policies are not particularly popular. Abortion, gun rights, all of these matters are not popular amongst urbanites, and most of American people live in urban centers or immediately surrounding them, and most of American economy is in the urban centers and the areas immediately surrounding them. So that's why they lose, because they have policies that are not popular in those areas. Wokeism is just a nonsensical term that is used way too often. Most people in the big cities are centrist, leaning left, but they're not so woke and they're not so left. But they're views are much more to the side of the Democrats now, to the Republicans.
Okay, and on that note, let's please feel free to interact from this point onwards. And
maybe one Democrat city on the left coast, on the East Coast, that's thriving, where crime isn't up, where economic growth is down, where they have balance, where they don't have balanced budget and huge deficits. So it's easy to call them anything but at the end of the day, they got problems, and at some point, the voters are going to see that. We're seeing that already. They're leaving the big cities. They're leaving the left coast. They're leaving the East Coast. They're coming to places like Florida and Texas because there they can live free, they can live responsibly, and yes, they're beginning to fall in love with our messaging.
We haven't seen that. Obviously, the answer was 7 out of the 8 times they've lost the popular vote. They've lost the popular vote in the last 4 in a row, if I'm not mistaken, at this point, or 5 in a row, except for Bush Jr., the one time after 9/11, the Republicans have lost the popular vote in every single election going back, and that is because there are more people in the United States who support the policies of the Democrats. That's the reality. If you change the policies, maybe it'll change, but that is the reality. Also, let's remember something. People also vote with their groups, and that also is very much a case. Urban America is very much aligned with Democrats, rural America with Republicans, and somewhere in between some of the exurbs that fall somewhere in between.
Corinne.
Yeah, a little bit ignorant of the latest results of the last 2 elections. Even if Republicans did not win the popular vote for president in 2020, we saw huge movement from these urban communities that you seem to think are locked in for Democrats that actually voted for Trump. And we saw the highest number of Hispanics to vote for a Republican candidate ever, the highest number of African Americans to vote for a Republican candidate ever. That is moving for all of the reasons my colleague just mentioned. These cities are crime-filled hellholes that people are fleeing left and right. So all of that gun control and pro-abortion, it's not benefiting anybody. And you're going to pay for that in the next few elections. I think that we're seeing that. That's why Republicans had such a high popular vote in 2022.
Right, but they lost the college-educated almost completely. So, you can balance it any way you want. The bottom line is more people voted for Democrats in all of these elections. The groups may change a little bit, but that's the reality. And I think it's mostly policy issue. It is also tribal issue as well, but it's mostly policy. And the Republican policies particularly hurt the cities in terms of taxes and all sorts of other areas while helping the rural communities. And so that's the reality. People are voting for their interests. People are voting for their tribes. And it's going to be very difficult to change that without some major changes in policy. Now, the Republicans can keep on winning the presidency because of the Electoral College, but it does not mean they can win the popular vote. It'll be very, very difficult for them to do so, especially with the young people coming up who seem to be overwhelmingly Democratic, especially after the abortion issue.
That's because you control the universities.
Oh, stop with the controls, the control of the minds. I mean, come on. Most minds these days are determined on social media, on TikTok, on YouTube, and all those places. They're not determined by the professors who are speaking in front of a classroom in a university. That's just not the case. It's a fable at this point. That? Yes, I do.
And why do you go to Republicans?
What? Excuse me, say that again?
Why? College-educated vote. You care very much that the college-educated vote did not go to Republicans, but if that's not where the vote is decided, who cares? The vote's decided on social media.
No, the point of the matter, the statement I'm making is that if you look at the changing demographics and who votes for who, that over the last few elections, the Republican Party has lost the college-educated, which they used to have an overwhelming majority of college-educated voters used to vote Republican. We've seen a switch. Blue-collar voters have voted Republican, who used to vote Democratic, and we've had college-educated voters who used to vote Republican, now voting Democratic. So you've had that switch. Blue collar has gone to the Republicans, college educated has gone to the Democrats. That's just a fact. I'm not giving any value to it. It's just a fact. And that's why if the Republicans are making some progress among Hispanics and others, they're losing amongst college educated whites, for instance. So it splits and it evens out, and there's been no great advance amongst the Republicans in the last group of elections.
So
numbers may have gone up.
In this respect, should or will Republicans vote strategically in the sense of who can beat a Democratic candidate or who can sway Democrats? Yigal.
I think
Corinne, please.
Republicans need to post on turning out the Republican vote. And when we do that, that is when we win. I think that's what we saw Trump do in 2016. And that is what I really, really hope that the lesson that the establishment takes from that is that you play to the base and let your policies sway the moderates. You don't play to the moderates and hope that your base turns out.
That's the mistake, obviously. The way you win is you may play to your base in the primaries, but you try to work to the center to get the centrists to vote for you in an election. It's a center that's a swing vote in the United States and always has been. And Trump may have won the actual election, electoral college, but he lost the popular vote because he did not appeal to the center at all. The center is where elections are decided.
You only have to win the electoral college vote to be the president of the United States. So if they want to play strategically to win an election, that's what I suggest they do.
There you go.
I suggest go back to where we started.
I'm actually going to agree with Mark here. Sorry, Corinne, but I think that America desperately needs leaders that, like Reagan, where you can open up your tent and try to bring in more folks than the core of your party. And I think that as we think about the upcoming election, it is critical to get out your base. Absolutely. But you need to appeal to more than just your base on either side. You need to build a tent that is much greater than just one party or the other. That's how you win elections. And that's why we need an inspiring leader on the Republican side, somebody that people can get around and not feel threatened by, somebody who can appeal to mothers and to suburban folks and to, college-educated folks who just want a better future. That's, I think, the key to winning this upcoming election.
Look, the more you bring out your own base, the more you bring out the other side's base, because the more the other side is afraid, and the other side's base comes out as well. I go back to what we said at the very beginning. Nikki Haley would be the perfect candidate for the Republicans.